Hello.
Hello,
Good to
Jane.
see you.
Good to see you again, Professor.
You are from MBA graduate in 2011, and then you are graduate in 2018. EMBA, right? So we have students from two different programs, and I'm very happy to have you here today. And then, we're going to share a little bit about your global management experience. Maybe you should start with an experience called culture shock. Have you ever had any culture shock in your career?
We had made some very big global acquisitions, which was also from US. And during the annual meeting preparation, so they had a book introducing everyone with a kind of a picture, including all males and females, which hotel they are staying, including their hotel room numbers. And for the foreigners who came, that was a kind of a shock to them. And within China, there were only about a handful of foreigners. And it was a shock to us as well, that not just for everyone putting the room number as well.
Every culture will have different norms and different practices. So, it could come as a shock, but then the reaction is that you adapt and adopt and respect the difference, and then just do what the Romes do. And then, then you start to learn about how the way they do things there.
Yes, and once you are in the system, and you understand the dynamics, then you can gradually make some changes,
Right.
which we also, over a period as we went international and interacted, some very good positive changes happened. But you have to do that within the system.
Great, very interesting experience. How about you, Melton? You came from Taiwan. Do you feel any?
Yes. I think the recent cultural shock I had is probably 3 years ago when I first took the global role. So basically, I am spending more time with my French colleagues to do some organizational announcement. I remember that. And it was very different because when I was in China, most of the time when you do the organizational evolution, before the announcement, you're just going to be in contact with some stakeholder who is relevant to this change, right? And second thing, in China, sometimes, you try to keep it a little bit confidential and just announce effective the day after and do it very fast and to announce the information. You can tell somehow the power distance is very strong centrally, so you just immediately it happened effective. Okay. But when I was in France, it's very different. So first of all, I still did the same way, but that was my biggest learned lesson. I did this the same way, but a lot of my management team feel very uncomfortable. They feel uncomfortable because in the French culture, it is so important, everybody is gonna ask your boss, why do we have this change? So they are asked the ambassador of this management company to explain the why, all their team members. So they feel uncomfortable, even it is not relevant to their division, but they need to know the why, the strategic intention behind, so they can interpret and communicate with his team. So that's why the first thing I was very shocked, because it was a very different way. After several months, my French colleague just made the joke. So he told me, in France, normally you see the organizational announcement until everybody knows in the coffee corridor already. So, which is very different the case in the China or Asian culture. So the learned lesson for me personally in that aspect is more, in Asia, sometimes it's more the country or the place that is about I would put the power of the result. But here is probably power of the result plus the power of the communication equal to the power of the influence. And how to influence globally seems to be a very interesting cultural topics there. Yeah.
Yes, I think there are a lot of differences in terms of that communication pattern, and then the underlying assumption is that it's about the power distance, right? So it's similar to the examples that you just gave, right? So one of the lessons that we have to learn is that when you are into a different culture or you're interacting with the people from a different culture, you need to observe, what's the power distance. Power distance high, then it's easy for people to just follow the instruction and say, yes, sir, I will follow what you say. But if the power distance is low, like the French, then, you cannot just tell them what to do. You have to explain why, and then information has to be shared, among the people, and not just a few key stakeholders. So that's very interesting. So any interesting stories to tell in terms of the cross-cultural experience? You managed 15 countries?
Yeah, and there's total 15 countries that we operate. I manage 11 of them.
11 of them. Yeah. Any interesting cross-cultural differences, stories that we can learn so that we avoid those mistakes?
So the concept of time in Spain is very different from concept of time in China or Germany. So that brings some amount of management challenges, let's say. 20 minutes delay or 15 minutes delay is kind of very being on the right time. I have a very good personal relation with our head of bureau, and when we have this discussion, like I tell him that I am his half secretary, that whenever there's going to be an important meeting, 5 minutes before I have to call him and tell him, hey, there's a meeting that you need to this thing. So he says that he has 2.5 secretaries, and we joke about it in the whole company. But we have to look for things which they are good at, and since we are doing business in those places, we have to adapt to this. If we become too finicky or stickler about certain things in where the whole culture or the ecosystem is like that, then the Chinese word is jijiao. You said that you were too finicky about things and people start avoiding you. So like you say, wherever you go, you have to become that. But at the same time, I think when they come to China for our annual meeting and stuff, they also adapt as per the Chinese time concept and other things. So this, I think, is going to be always a work in progress and a constant communication, and it has to be adapted from both of them. As Chinese companies are going overseas, and in every country they have to adapt locally, that's why I tell the same thing to my overseas teams, that you have decided and you have made a conscious decision to work for a Chinese company. So it cannot be one way that, okay, they have to come. You also have to make certain adjustments because it's your conscious decision.
You know, the Chinese is so famous in their speed and, get things done so fast. And so do you have any problems when you deal with cultural differences? Just think that they are too slow?
Okay, I think I have some fun fact. Let me put it this way. In the global R&D management framework, there is one very popular recently one is called the Agile, right? It is more about giving you spending same resource. How do you maximize the customer values output? It's really convincing in the Western culture because people believe I don't live for work, I work for life, right? So I try to say, given the same working hours I am spending here, I want to maximize the customer values output. But it's very interesting in China, the culture people see that very differently. Most of the Chinese players, actually they want the speed, they don't want the agile. The speed means you can reach the probably 3 times spend by spending much more time at work, much more diligence, much more trial, much more working hours at work, so you can reach the 3 times speed, right? So this link with one of the interesting cultural factor. I don't know, some scholarship call the Confucianism, some scholarship calls the long-term orientation. So I think in the Asian culture, I think in China, Korea, in Singapore, people have the tendency to follow the Confucianism, so people would like to really tolerate, really stand, and really work very hard to strive hard to really get there to get the result done. But this is not available everywhere. So I think this is one of the cultural differences. I realized, okay, agile and speed are very different, and behind that probably is a cultural factor behind there.
So it comes down to communication. We have this okay, why certain companies, particularly the Chinese companies, have grown so fast over the last 10 to 15 years. And I get this question many times. And I tell them that the belief in the Western or developed world that everything needs to be thought through. There will be months and sometimes even years of research, market strategy, and then they will try. And however, for Chinese companies, let's get things done. And we learn along the way. And which I think is the better strategy. I would not say the right strategy, given that things are changing so rapidly in every single industry that we see. That by the time if you take 6 months to 1 year to decide what to do, maybe by the time you start the action, you already need to decide that we need to do things differently. So this is the reason some of the very big Chinese companies, the telecom companies, let's say, there were some very big European who ruled them out, saying that they are too rudimentary, they do not plan things, do not think. Now many of those European companies, you don't hear their name any longer, and these Chinese companies have become the best even in technology. So it's all this about incremental learning, or in project management you call that agile. Now the concept of this, like also the Western world, the developed world, they try to keep the work and life separate. This is actually true. But if it's maybe a 10,000 people company, it's difficult to do. But if it's a few hundred people company, communicate more in a like leadership at core or that empathetic way. The way which we have done successfully, like I was telling you, that our European colleagues would work in the weekend, they would reply on this. It came from, first I started jokingly saying that let's not talk about work-life balance. Let's talk about work-life integration. So what that means is, with the coming of WhatsApp and WeChat, life has become easy, but that also has become that you are always accessible. Now let's say if my brother from Canada is sending me a message, I will not see what time of the day or it is a weekend to reply to him. I would reply to him then. So similarly, if we can get over this concept that we are just colleagues and we go beyond being colleagues, then if I am sending some message or somebody else is sending me some message for which I do not need to open my laptop and do some research, it's an information that is on my mind or their mind, they don't need to wait until Monday morning to reply. It is just like if you truly take me as your friend, would you do the same thing to your friend that your friend has sent a message to Friday evening and you wait until Monday morning? And they could get it, because many of the information just take a click. And so this is how we have made it very common, which is a very Chinese way. But like I said, it's a two-way that only Chinese going and they have to totally adapt is not going to happen. They have to also come and meet us at the midway.
Yeah, I remember, in the past, I used to have this argument with my husband. He used to work in the US and he always said, weekend, you don't work, that is my time. But then I tend to be integration, like, weekend, why don't you work? Sometimes, you spend 1-2 hours to work, but you can also be flexible in terms of your weekdays. So we always have that argument on how do you draw the line, do you need to draw the line. So I think that's also cultural differences that you have to deal with.
I think that line you mentioned very interestingly, and I think that line is drawn in the sand. So that means it needs to change according to the situation.
I have some interesting observation regarding this the agile kind of iterative learning. In cultural aspect, I normally call it, probably look at the different cultures, I call it avoid uncertainties, okay? It's very different. In Chinese culture, even in some Indian culture, people are, very used to the uncertainties. So let's go ahead like this, right? So people are saying, okay, we're 50% clear, let's go. But in some culture like France, like Germany, they're pretty much square. Japan as well. So they are kind of avoid the uncertainties. And what does that mean? I make the speech to my different sighting. I say, in France, I feel my team is like a super good sniper, right? Boom, one shot, one bullet. They think through carefully and trying to understand really inside out, outside in, the physics behind. They shoot the bullet very accurately. In China, it's more like a machine gun, with a lot of the trial, prototype, learn by doing, fail, learn by doing, testing, learning, right? So which one is better? Now my answer is always depends on the timing of your maturity of the technology. If you have a technology that is in the earlier phase, perhaps thinking through, do a sniper over there because you're solving really some of the fundamental physics problem over there. So in that aspect, really thinking through, you have the chance to do some architecture that is really cutting edge and lead ahead of the era. But if you're in the mature cycle of the category of the mature technology somehow over there, probably do it in a more agile way, because even it is 50%, the cost of the failure is very limited. But in the beginning of the early cycle, the cost of the failure is high. So that's why I feel this is a very different cultural aspect and we should leverage them both.
They can learn from each other. Right, very interesting observation. Do you have any examples to illustrate the difference between individualism society and collectivism society? So one emphasizes a lot on individual success, achievement, and individual differences, and the other one, it's like emphasize a lot on consensus, teamwork, etc. Any challenges in that aspect in your experience?
I can start. I have two examples. First interesting one is the town hall speech, right? In China, it is simple. I will start from President Xi committed to reach something by 2030. So we need to do A, B, C. In France, nobody is listening to me. If I stop my speech from President A is saying A, B, C, we need to do what, right? I need to start from the community over there, your individualism. How do we ensure this innovative environment can be sustainable for you and your next generation in this city? Then people start to kind of feel. So they look at more individualism goal than the collective goal. Okay. The second example is in the goal setting with the employee, right? I think for the goal setting, they really expect you have a mutual discussion with him, and they tend to feel once you reach the goal setting, this is the box of them. They are committed to deliver something within that box. So that means the goal setting, the process is very different for the individuals and collecting. Collectivism is more, you say, okay, our collectivism goal is 1, 2, 3. They will try to interpret your collectivism into their, it's like a cascading down the KPI, something, a little bit like that way. So I think this kind of will affect the leadership way of the communication and trying to reach the goal alignment and goal setting with the team.
I think there's some amount of individualism is there across the. If you look at actually in US culture, there's celebrity CEOs, Jack Welch, Musk, and Bezos. You take it. So is it individualism or it is collectivism? In China, you don't come out as there are the founders and this, but there's no called professional CEOs who are treated as celebrities. Europe, I would say that it's much more flat. So instead of individualism versus collectivism, it's again for me is the communication. Is the communication more transparent and two-way, or it's a more one-way of communication? In China, that's what it is. It's a more one way of communication, like my boss has said. Why are you doing it? So that's, or how does it contribute towards the company's goals? Or okay, what is your understanding of strategy? What you are doing, do you think is aligned to that strategy and end goal? In Chinese context, many of them may not think through because this has been asked by that bosses to do. But in Western world, maybe Europeans, they will say, hey, wait, this is our strategy and this is our supposed to be goal. But what you are asking me is going to take away my time and resources in something which will not add to that strategy. So these are the kind of a communication of a more flat and transparent communication that you need to hear from them, and they feel it is important.
Good. Thank you so much. Thank you for your sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.